Today's lesson is going to be an introduction to the novel Journey to Joburg by Beverly Naidoo. So this book was written by Beverly Naidoo, who is a South African writer who actually grew up in the town of Johannesburg, where our novel is based. But before we can get too far into talking about the book, we need to actually talk about one of the main topics in the book, which is apartheid. So apartheid is, or was, a system of government in South Africa between 1948 and 1994. The word itself literally means apartness or to separate, and it was a mandated segregation of the racial groups within South Africa. So a lot like the racial segregation that went on here in the United States, but way more relevant in that I was actually born in 1991 and this was still going on in 1994. So there were four groups that were then classified by the South African government. Your black population, which was, as you can see here on this pie chart, 71%. Your white population, which was only 16%. Your colored population, who are going to be kind of like your mixed race people, think interracial marriages and things like that, that is 10% of the population. And then your Asian population, which was only 3% of the population in South Africa. So that being said, our author was Beverly Naidoo, and when she was growing up in South Africa, it was a country that was divided by those racial groups and forced some of them to carry passbooks, restricted where they could do, where they could go, where they could sit, what kind of jobs they could hold. Does this remind you of anything? So the first book that Naidoo read that had a real impact on her was The Diary of Anne Frank, which is a World War II novel about a young girl who was taken into a concentration camp just for being Jewish. So as she read about Anne's life, she realized that if her family had not left Europe for South Africa, that they would have then suffered the same fate as Anne, as her mother, Beverly's mother, was Jewish. And she was amazed that there was this outcry about the treatment of Jews by the Nazi population, but there was no opposition happening in South Africa given the similar racism that was taking place. I mean, the only difference was they weren't rounding up the people and putting them into concentration camps, but they were still enforcing a lot of the same, rules and stipulations among the black South Africans, like they were with the Jewish population. So by the time Beverly was in her 20s, she was involved in the political movement to help end apartheid in South Africa. This included the writing of her novel, Journey to Joburg. So how did South Africa react to this? So the book she wrote and published was actually banned in South Africa, so her family and friends could not even read her work. It wasn't until 1991 that people in South Africa finally had access to her book. And at this point in time, apartheid is gradually starting to come to an end. This is between 1990 and 1993. So in 1994, your black South Africans were able to vote in the first democratic election. Enter Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela led the African National Congress, which had been outlawed since the 1960s to victory in South Africa's first free election. He became the president on April 26th of 1994. And then because of this election, the majority or the minority population in South Africa, being the whites, would no longer be able to control the lives of your black South Africans.